We've got a fight coming up in the near future between Teofimo Lopez and Josh Taylor. Now, I think that leads us a perfect opportunity to ask the question, can Teofimo Lopez return to his old self? We saw in his last fight with Sandor Martin that after the fight, he's in there, he's getting his gloves untaped, he's standing against the ropes, and he kind of looks, I don't know who he was talking to, that guy was off camera, but the camera was on tail, and he made the comment, and I'm paraphrasing here, do I still got it? Do I even still got it? Something along those lines. Now, that's a question to ask yourself. That's a question to kind of just put out into the universe rhetorically. Now, he came back and tried to retract that a little bit later, tried to walk it back and said that it was all due to the art of war. He was playing psychological warfare with potential future opponents. He said that he's been avoided and people have not called him out and things along those lines. So he was putting that out there, knowing that the camera was recording. He's like, hey, I've had a lot of cameras in my face. I saw the red light was on. So he put it out there knowing that the camera was recording, hoping that he would fake a sign of weakness so that people would jump on the opportunity and he could get bigger fights. Look, I'm not buying it. I've seen his performance in these last 3 fights. We saw his loss to George Kambosos. We saw his performance against Campa. And then we saw him go out there against Sandor Martin. Those weren't impressive performances. One of those was a loss. 2 of them should have been a loss. None of those were impressive. Now think about this for a second. You got a young man. He's still, 25 years old? So you have a young man who went on a tremendous run, culminating in his victory over Vasily Lomachenko, which was still to this day, I think, an incredible performance. I still don't think that he gets quite enough credit for that. And part of that is the fact that I think people don't give Lomachenko quite enough credit. But, that's another story. But after those 3 performances, man, it has been underwhelming every single time out. Every single time out, we've expected Teofimo, man, is he going to return to his old form? Is he going to get back to those heights? Is he going to be the guy that we have always seen and we've always expected him to be? And he hasn't done it. Maybe you go out there against George Kambosos, you've got the documented medical issue. Okay, in hindsight, we can understand why that happened. But then we see the fight against Campa. What's going on now? Now we see the fight against Sandor Martin. It's not a bad night at the office anymore. It's not an off day. Now it's 3 times in a row. I think statistically we can start to call that a trend, right? But think about it. The question remains, can Teofimo Lopez return to his former self? No. He can't. It's just not going to happen. Now, I know some people may think that sounds negative. It may sound pessimistic. It may sound as though I'm being just overly harsh on the guy. Hear me out. Hear me out. Let me defend my point. The former self, the guy that we saw that culminated in that run with that incredible victory over Vasily Lomachenko, it was a young guy who was incredibly confident, who was able to operate at the height of his skills, and the height of his skills saw the most success. Now, what I mean by that is Teofimo Lopez is naturally physically gifted. He's incredibly explosive, fast hands, fast feet. He can be creative in there when he's flowing and he's loose and he's got a good rhythm. He's got tremendous power at 135 pounds, and he's got a style that leads into all of that. He's aggressive. Sometimes he gets he leaps and gets ahead of himself. He'll get off balance. He'll throw these super hard shots, but he was able to cover up for all of the technical mistakes that he made by being just so fast and so strong and so explosive. Guys didn't want to get caught with those counter shots. Once guys got hurt, he was able to go out and do things. He was just able to go out there and shine in every way that you could imagine. He was able to land these super flashy, super hard counter punches. Just great stuff. Great stuff all the way around. And because he was just continually building, continually seeing all that success, what you also saw was a young man who was incredibly confident. You saw a young man who was playing into his natural abilities. His natural abilities were seeing success, which was then giving him more confidence to go back and reinvest in his natural abilities in the way that he fought. Man, it's this great cycle that just feeds on itself. But all of that ended with that loss to Kambosos. All of that was over. All of that ended. Now, it didn't need to. We've seen plenty of guys take losses and be able to come back. Sometimes better than ever. But here's the thing. It's incredibly mentally challenging when that happens. I mean, dude, it's so difficult to take a loss like that. You want to know how difficult it is? Teofimo Lopez still hasn't come back from it. I believe that was the chink in the armor. That was the beginning of all. That's what started that downward slide. I mean, he's been open about mental health issues that he's dealt with. So think about that. You saw a man who's incredibly confident. He's at the top of his game. He's succeeding at the top. But then as soon as there's a little bit, those mental health issues are what's preventing him from coming back. I mean, look, he physically can't be the same fighter at 140 because I don't think his power carries. He's still just as fast and explosive, and he can go out there and he can land the shots. We saw him landing shots against Ciampa and stuff like that, but he wasn't able to get him out of there. So the power doesn't carry. When that power doesn't carry, I believe that he was so used to knocking guys out and being so dominant and hitting guys and having them go away that now that he can't, it affects that confidence a little bit. Because he's got these mental health issues, he's not able to overcome that mentally and emotionally the way that he needs to be able to go out there and maybe readapt or maybe adjust a little bit to get back to that place. You're not going to be an incredibly successful, incredibly dominant fighter at the highest levels without just supreme confidence, without believing in yourself 100%. And I think he's at a point where he doesn't. And I don't know, personally, I think he's at a point where he may never get back to that point. He may reach his highest point in the future of only being 90% confident. But there was a time when he was 100 and we saw him operating at that best level. I mean, look, man, that's just from the mental aspect because of the power not carrying. I also believe that he's got some technical flaws that because he doesn't have the power carrying, they're able to get exposed more. Easiest example, let's look at his last fight against Sandor Martin. He didn't work the jab. By not working the jab, he wasn't setting his shots up. By not setting his shots up, he couldn't get his power shots off. That's a technical flaw. Why aren't you working the jab? Why aren't you setting your shots up? Why aren't you using more feints? You know, if that's not working, this guy's tricky. He's a crafty, elusive southpaw. He's landing a check right hook. Why aren't you trying to throw off his timing? Why aren't you going to the body more to slow him down instead of allowing him to pivot back up to the ropes and pivot out the way that he was? Like, there was a lot of things going on there that we could look at from a technical aspect and also say Teofimo isn't executing at that level. But the thing about the technical aspect is this. He never did before. He never did before. I mean, he's always been a very good fighter, and we've always seen him be able to get off. I'm not trying to say that the man has no boxing skill. That's ridiculous. But let's not confuse him with Floyd Mayweather either, just because he was going out there and getting these stupendous knockouts. When we go back and we analyze the tape, we can see that he's always had some technical flaws. Think about a Manny Pacquiao. Always had some technical flaws, but the speed and the power and the explosiveness and the combination punching were able to overcome those technical flaws, and he was able to beat guys who could see those flaws but not be able to execute on them. That was Teofimo at 135 pounds. Teofimo at 140 pounds, because of that lack of power, doesn't intimidate or scare guys the same way that he used to. He doesn't prevent them from coming in or doesn't prevent them from trying to do what they need to do. They see certain things that they can do. They see certain flaws. Those guys at 140 pounds are able to execute on that. So I don't think that we're going to see the Teofimo Lopez at 135 pounds at 140 pounds. Just not going to happen. Now, could he get a nutritionist and maybe figure some things out and find a way to get back to 135? Maybe. I don't really know how tough that weight cut is or how disciplined he was being before and if that's even a possibility. I mean, probably not. He's always been a big 135er and he's only getting older, right? He's a young guy who's getting older, and as that frame fills out and that body fills out, just don't think he's going to be able to make that weight anymore. I think Teo at 140 is the Teo that we're going to get, at least for the time being. So I don't think he's going to get back to 135. I don't think he's going to end up having the power at 140. I think there was only one way for Teofimo Lopez to be able to get back to the heights that he was once at, even though he wouldn't necessarily look like the same fighter. And that is he has to adjust his style. He's got to make a big adjustment, right? He's got to go in there and he's got to use the jab more. He's got to set shots up more. He's got to figure out how to fight backwards as well as going forwards. He has to transition better between offense and defense. I mean, he does it when he sets his shot up. You look and it's like, wow, look at the way he caught that shot and threw that counter. Or look at the way he rolled the steam off that right hand and came back with some fire of his own. But we see him get caught with a lot of stuff. We see him get hit with a lot of shots, just in his last fight, or last three, Cambosos, Ciampa, and Sandor Martin. He was getting caught with a lot of shots in all of those fights. It's because he needs to be more defensively responsible. And through that defensive responsibility, he's going to be able to find his counter-punching opportunities, which is where he shines. I mean, dude, when you've got a guy who's got good vision, incredibly explosive, accurate, when he slows things down and he can find those counter-punching opportunities, they're so dominant. Right? Because by the nature of the counterpunching opportunity, you're catching your opponent by surprise. And when you catch him by surprise and he doesn't see that shot, man, those are the ones that take guys out of there. They really do. So I think Teofimo is going to have to switch up that style, man. He's going to have to get better with the jab. He's going to have to use more feints. He's going to have to slow down a little bit to potentially find these countering opportunities. He's going to have to become more defensively responsible. And guess what? Here's a big one. Here's a huge one. He has to learn how to make adjustments mid-fight. There was a long time where we were criticizing his father about giving improper advice in the corner in between rounds. That's not what we saw the last fight. We saw him step his game up as far as the advice that he was giving. We saw Teofimo not execute on that advice. So he's got a lot to work on, man, in a short period of time. You know, we've seen these promos coming up. He's got this fight with Josh Taylor right around the corner. We saw in the Shakur Stevenson fight, they were already giving Teofimo airtime, trying to build a promotion for it. It's a big one. We saw Bob Arum trying to make this fight years ago before Teofimo, went over and fought Kambosos. So it's kind of a culmination of things coming around. Probably would have been better for him to take that fight back then versus taking it now. I don't think he's in quite as good of a spot. But look, if you've watched this channel before, you know I'm a fan of the guy. I like seeing him fight. I'm always going to tune into all of his fights. I hope the best for him, man. I wish him the best. I want to see him succeed. You know, you see a guy with all of those physical talents, and you've seen him succeed at that level before, and it just gives you this itch and this burning desire that you hope that he can make it back, because they were such good performances. They were so impressive. They were so entertaining to watch and to speculate on what his future could be. So I want to see him get back to that level. But man, I don't know if he's going to be able to. I think it's a tall order. You know, as this fight gets closer, we'll be able to break down technique for technique and see exactly how he matches up. But I don't know, man. We may have seen, when it's all said and done and we look back, we may be saying that night that Teofimo Lopez went out there against Vasily Lomachenko and snatched up all the belts, we may end up saying that was the best performance of his career. Let me know what you guys think.